Coming at you from the ATL, from inside the paint and beyond the arc. This is Nothin But Nest, your Atlanta Hawks podcast. Now, here are your hosts, DeShaun Tate and Caleb Johnson.
Welcome into Nothin But Nest, episode 32, an Odyssey podcast here covering the Atlanta Hawks. What a week it's been since you and I have spoke, DeShaun. Of course, DeShaun Tate alongside me, Caleb Johnson. It's been a whirlwind of just these last few days. I mean, obviously, the last time that you and I spoke, we're discussing the firing of Nate McMillan, how this team is going to put this thing together for the final 22 games of the regular season, and what this is all going to look like. Of course, the rumors of Quin Snyder were going around, but you never knew when things were going to go official. And then we finally get here. Sunday night, the announcement comes that Quin Snyder is going to be the 15th head coach hired in franchise history. I thought it was funny. I posted DeShaun from the press conference earlier today. Of course, as we're recording on Monday. I posted from the press conference that we were, the 15th head coach in franchise history was being introduced, and Steve Holman commented and goes, "Well, I've only got to work with 12 of them." And I thought, I mean, first off, incredible historian that you are, Steve Holman, the fact that you've worked with 12 different head coaches of this franchise. But my response to Steve was, hey, hopefully this one sticks. So as we get the conversation going, DeShaun, Quin Snyder, I know it wasn't the name that you necessarily had picked for where this franchise could go, but once you hear it, what are you starting to think about this?
A++, if there's a such thing as a grade of such. Sure. I think it's a phenomenal hire. I'm not sure that there's anybody out there that would have been better. I know we've had conversations.
There isn't.
Yeah, I don't think that there is. We talked about Udoka and whatever else, and I get it from what he did for, the one full season, and give him the credit for what he did in that one season. But just from what we know beyond one season, I think that Quin is certainly the perfect person for this. And let me just be very, very clear about this, because I've been waiting to kind of get this one off my chest, because I know what a lot of people want to know about how it fits and all this stuff. Don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to say it, because this is how I'm feeling. Quin Snyder ain't for the bullshit, Caleb. Like, Quin Snyder is, listen. It is what it is, and you've been needing this. Sometimes it was a little concerning for me. And to me, while I respect the hell out of these guys, sometimes I felt like Lloyd and Nate didn't, that quiet conservative, that's not going to cut it with these young guys. And it's not that, Quin is, much younger at all than these guys. Some of them the same age, probably even older, certainly than Lloyd, but I just think that it's what the team needs. You want a coach? I'm not going to call him a real coach, because that'd be disrespecting the other guys. But if you want that coach that could take you to the next level, a guy who I think has proven to what magnitude, probably not going to finals and whatever else, but he's going to come in here and he's gonna put the foot down. And I think that we're going to learn a lot about him and learn a lot about this team and his schemes and his systems. And I hope that they embrace it. Because it's not always that these young guys of your generation, Caleb, like to listen to some of the elder spokesmen who can bring the best out of everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I want to go a couple of different ways, very similar to the exact thought that you're presenting, which is something that John Collins said about Nate McMillan, and I thought it also applied to Lloyd Pierce. Lloyd Pierce was brought in to kind of manage this young roster and be a development guy to some extent. But as much as he might have been a good developer as an assistant, in his head coach role, Lloyd was very quiet, even-keeled demeanor, didn't get too excited. And I feel like Nate was very similar. It was almost, Nate was very much on this, like, just do your job. Like I don't, Why do I need to rah? Why do I need to come on, guys, you can do it? But, I'll give you the believe. Like, I'll give you the clear, calm, connected. I'll give you all of that. But you got to go out there and have some personal responsibility for yourself and make things happen. John Collins was one to say, I think Nate McMillan is better suited as a head coach for a veteran team. And when he said it, it was almost like the group of reporters was like, let the church say amen, because that's exactly what so many of us have felt with Nate McMillan, is like he's not for the bull. He's not for the hand holding and all of those different elements. And this team needs that. And John Collins was one to say, I think we need the nurturing. We need the development. We need, and something that after Nate McMillan was fired, I asked Landry Fields about was, how much is a head coach being a motivator matter to you? Because I'm someone who thinks my head coach doesn't need to be a hand holder. He doesn't need to be a rah-rah guy. He doesn't need to be all of these things unless that's what the team needs. And so it feels like for me, DeShaun, like my natural position is to go, guys, grow up. Like, figure it out. You don't need some guy to in the head coach role to do these things. And so it's much easier from being on the outside, not being the guy who handed over $40+ million to Trae Young, and he's probably going to look to do the same with DeJounte Murray if they're able to. It's easy for me to say, well, just move on from the players if they're not mature enough to handle these things, and go get somebody else, because the head coach isn't the big problem. However, now that they've got Quin Snyder, the guy, something that Landry Fields was looking for was a guy to develop talent. And if there's anything that you've seen from Quin Snyder on the sidelines, and it actually made me a bit nervous to speak with him and to kind of wonder what type of personality he's got for like press conferences and things like that, is because all I've seen this guy is a grumpy, like he's out yelling at somebody. Whether it's a referee, whether it's a player, like dude's always got an angry demeanor on his face. And so I was like, oh, guy, is this guy like rough around the edges when we go to talk to him? And he was extremely kind, just a very, very nice guy. And so you talked about A+ hire. I will go, because it's baseball season now, DeShaun. I will go home run higher and say, yeah, I'm just gonna skip over your little March stuff that you got going on. It's a home run hire that the Atlanta Hawks get Quin Snyder, who Landry Fields just happened to throw out in their phone conversations, or amongst their conversations of guys they were looking to hire, that Quin Snyder was just so happened to be the first phone call that Landry Fields made. Let's listen to Landry real quick.
So when we made our change with Nate, I had Kyle give Quinn a call. He was our first call. And going into it, I said that we wanted to be aggressive. And the reason I could say that was because we had already lined up what we were looking for in our next basketball coach. And fortunate for us, getting on the phone with Quinn, he mentions humility and selflessness as core and chief to some of the character that he wants in and around the basketball team, as well as what we're trying to do in the front office. I was almost sold right there. So it was a big moment, getting to know him through that process, and just couldn't be more excited about it.
So Quinn is the first phone call that not Landry Fields made, but Kyle Korvert made, because we obviously know the player connection here, with Kyle being in Atlanta when Quinn was an assistant in Atlanta, and then Kyle going and playing for a quick minute in Utah for Quin Snyder's team. So there's that familiarity already with the city. There's a familiarity with the assistant GM. Then it was just about clearing up the other small details. But I thought it was interesting, DeShaun, that for Landry to say, like, I know a lot of teams go, and when they introduce their head coach, oh, this is our first option. This is our first option. And yet most times they don't believe them. This truly feels, DeShaun, like it was the Atlanta Hawks' first option. And I got to say, this is the best thing that this new front office has done in their short time is hiring Quin Snyder. Because whether it works or not, it's not like they didn't try their hardest to get the best man for the job. Like, if it doesn't work, DeShaun, I got to be honest with you, I'm going to be looking at someone on the roster, not in the front office and not who's coaching this team. But I don't want to go negative. I don't want to go negative today. I just feel really excited, quite honestly. Rejuvenated, I might even add, about this team, about where I see this team headed, in the fact that they've got a guy who seems to know what he's doing, is an adult in the room, and could potentially be the perfect option for this Atlanta Hawks team.
We talked about adults in the room, that being one of the things that I felt like that they needed more than anything. And this is where you have to start, because this is the guy that's leading the herd. This is the guy that's leading the pack and leading the way. Commend them for going after, the Atlanta Hawks in many ways. I'm talking about in the past, previously. I don't feel the most comfortable or confident saying that they've always gone after the right guy and made the best decisions. Hell, for the guy who, is the face of this franchise, many people would say that, that they dropped the ball right there on draft night.
Sure.
But they did the right thing here. And it's got to start somewhere when you start making changes. There's a reason why the windshield looks a lot bigger than the rear view. Those days are in the past. You like that one, Caleb?
I do. I do like that one.
Sure. Don't try and steal it. You got to ask for permission or fill out a permission slip before you use
I
that
will.
one, like you going on a field trip.
I will give you your copyright in the future as I use that motivational, inspirational phrase there. I love it.
For sure. And I mean, but listen, you go after the best guy out there. That I think it's pretty clear and that everybody knows is the best guy. You land the best guy, because it's one thing to reach out and go through this interview process and all this other kind of stuff, but to land that person, saying all the right things, all those things make a difference for sure.
I was one of those people who I did a radio spot a week ago where they were like, hey, Quin Snyder, what do you think about him being a potential option for the Atlanta Hawks? And I was like, I'm always wearisome when I get a name thrown in my face of when Woj, when Shams, when they start throwing a name out here of like, this is who we're hearing. I'm all into like, why are we hearing this? Why is this the name that's getting thrown out there? Is it because the leak inside the Hawks organization that's giving information to Woj and Shams that's who the Hawks want? Because I was thinking this whole time, like, I'm sure the Atlanta Hawks want Quin Snyder, but does Quin Snyder want the Atlanta Hawks? Yeah. And I wasn't convinced that was going to be the case. I do think it helps, DeShaun, I will say, and if this is reported, this is not confirmed, because the team doesn't talk about contract length and money involved. I will say, one easy way to get a guy to agree to coming back from stepping away from being a head coach is to make him the top 5 highest paid coach in the NBA from day one. Like that's, giving Quin Snyder a reported 5-year contract at $8 million a year, making him tied with what Mike Budenholzer and Nick Nurse, top 5 in the league of coach's salary. That'll definitely make you go, huh? Especially when, to the best of my knowledge, we're talking, Nate McMillan was somewhere in the like $3 million range. So pretty big gap there from, and of course that came from being an interim and them, just kind of building up. And I feel like, DeShaun, that's a little bit of the Hawks' problem. Like one of those interesting things that they seemed to realize after last season was, oh yeah, this whole idea for us to run it back with the same team was a bad idea. And it was like, as much as I loved Nate, and I think Nate is a great man, and could do really well with a different type of team. It was just like, so you never thought about maybe running it back with Nate wasn't the best idea either. It's just one of those. Of course, we can play revisionist history all day long. It was just interesting that they saw their mistake with the roster and didn't with the head coach position. And now, as you talk about the wind, the front windshield being bigger than the rear view, it feels like this is the start of, okay, let's start making the right moves no matter what we did in the past, and move forward with a guy who is exactly the type of coach that Landry Fields had talked about. He wanted somebody who could develop players. I know Landry also spoke today about the fact that a really interesting history for Quin Snyder, who, of course, coached in the college ranks, coached in the G League, coached overseas, and in the NBA. As I believe he said he's been a coach for 16 years, if I remember that correctly. But having all of those different ranges, you've dealt with a lot of different types of talent, and so it's not the thing that honestly that Nate McMillan got kind of blamed for. Of Nate has his way of going about things, and if it didn't fit his way, then it wasn't going to work. Well, Quin Snyder's had to be adaptable to whatever situation he's been in, and I feel like that could really benefit this Atlanta Hawks team, who, this isn't, there's going to be plenty more moves to be made in the future, but this feels like a really big one in the right direction. I'm curious for you, DeShaun, how do you feel about the midseason move of not just letting Joe Prunty coach the remainder of these 20 games, and instead bring in a new guy, a third voice at this point in the season?
Is it for the best of the team? Is it going to add more numbers to the left side of the result column? You're going out here, you're paying this man this money, you're doing this and you're doing that, you're rolling out the red carpet, all the bells and whistles and limousines and sleek things. Bring them in. I don't know if it's the best or the brightest idea in the world, but that's what he's here to do. That's what you brought him here to do. If not nothing else, develop and establish that chemistry between he and his team, and that's something that's obviously going to take time. I mean, it's going to take time even after this season ends, no matter if they don't make the play-in or if they win a world championship. That's still going to be something that's going to be a process day by day. I thought it was very telling when we were talking about the press conference since, Nate's release and so forth. And, just how many players said that practice felt different almost. Like practice was more optimistic, it was more positivity. It was more glass half full. We hadn't had a practice like this since however long that it's been, which I don't think was a total slap in the face to Nate, but it's about the players feeling good and feeling confident and comfortable about who's leading them. I remember Quinn from his, early days of coaching at Missouri.
Yep.
And I think he's even, been on the under the Coach K coaching staff for a point in time, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he played for Coach K.
Or played for Coach K. So I think, this is where all those things kind of start to kind of add up to make sure that this is the right guy. And if it's not, then it's not, but you're not going to know unless you go out there and find out. And, I fully anticipate him probably coaching as early as when the next game, maybe?
Yeah.
That's
been the conversation, is that he would at least be on the bench for Tuesday's game against the Wizards. Of course, we'll spend a little more detailed time talking about the Wizards in just a bit. But it does seem from everything that's been reported and from the way that Quinn was speaking is that he may not be calling plays per se,
Sure.
because he
Sure.
did say he's got some catching up to do to learn
Sure.
about this team. And I did, like, I thought that was nice to hear. Of he's truly been away from the game. Like he walked away. I mean, I'm sure watching to some extent games and that
Keeping
sort
up
of
to a
thing.
degree.
Yeah, but Quin Snyder spoke about wanting to spend time with his family and how important that was, because it was one of those, I think for him it seemed like he didn't want to step away from the game entirely, but he just needed some time to do his thing for a bit and to get that family relationship that so many times for coaches, they're on the road, they're flying out and going to do workouts with players or something like that, even in their off-season time. So there's very limited time for family and that sort of thing. So it seems like Quinn was able to do what he wanted to do, getting that time with his family, and now he's really back into this thing and invested again. And so he's got to learn this team. I think also too is it felt like, with Landry Fields wanting to bring Quinn in is to get him familiar with the team, but at the same time, they want some continuity with all of this. I'll be curious to see how Quinn builds his staff, because most of Quin Snyder's staff that he worked with in Utah is actually still in Utah with Will Hardy. Like, most of them just stayed there. So I'll be curious to see how many of the staff members for the Atlanta Hawks this season stick around and remain to work underneath Quin Snyder. I would personally, I would love if Joe Prunty sticks around, because and this is one of those things that I know probably a lot of fans don't really care about, but the relationship between media and the head coach and media and players, if it's really pleasant, it makes the job so much more enjoyable. And not that Nate wasn't enjoyable. It was just that Nate was quite obviously frustrated. He was at his wit's end, maybe, and I mean, look, there were plenty of reports, and I've got my own information that has me believing Nate McMillan wanted to walk away from this team because he did not think he was able to reach them anymore. However, it appears the Atlanta Hawks were the ones not interested in letting McMillan walk away because they didn't want even more turmoil. They thought they could hold this thing together for at least the rest of the season. Now, Landry Fields has spoken on the record and said that he has no knowledge of Nate McMillan wanting to step away. And, of course, you understand sometimes we don't always get told the truth.
Sure.
So, but with all of that, though, it's just, Nate was kind of used to giving similar types of answers. And just getting through the day, getting through the media sessions and all that sort of thing. Joe Prunty came in, and he's like, I was learning stuff. Like, I needed, DeShaun, I know you normally keep your pen and your notepad around. I was like, man, I need, I usually take notes on my phone, and I was like, my thumbs can't keep up with Joe Prunty. Like, I need a notepad and notebook so I can be taking notes on the way that he was explaining things, how they go about certain decisions, and then just understanding the game a little bit better and how they wanted to go about some specific things, especially some in-game management that Prunty was just incredible on. And it seems that Quin Snyder is just as much loves having those conversations that for someone who has to cut up the audio might be a little difficult, but for all of us who want to like learn some things, it feels like that's an additional thing that's going to be really positive about this experience, is that we're going to get a guy who doesn't mind, teaching the media as well and explaining those decisions, and wants to be here, wants to be a part of this, is excited about the opportunity. And so I know DeShaun, this is going to come out like a love fest for Quin Snyder once we're done, but it's just, I don't know. It really is. It's interesting how a franchise making a move like this based on all of the stuff that's happened earlier in the season. It's just like, what a breath of fresh air that we've got some stuff to be excited about.
And that's what that's what it feels like. I think that speaking for the most part, for the consensus, being that, the people feel like it's a positive move. It's a move in the right direction. I'm not hearing a lot of pushback or rebuttals about this hire. Like, I'm hearing about how good it is, and that's what it should be. That's what I anticipate. It's just a feel good all across the board. So it's we're supposed to be salivating at the mouth of this hire, because it's one that everybody just has the good feeling about. And usually when that happens, you haven't heard a whole bunch of, well, I hope it works out, but I don't know. There hasn't been too much of those conversations.
And let's be honest, at least I don't know how you feel, but from my perspective, hiring Lloyd Pierce and promoting Nate McMillan from interim to the full-time head coach, both times those things happened, it was a lot of like, okay, this could be good. Yeah. I think it was a lot of
could be's and
and honest, like, when it comes to Nate, everybody, I say, because I think fans were just as involved in this as much as Tony Ressler and the front office, that sort of thing, were swept up in 2021 and all the success that happened in that moment. And so it was like, okay, yeah, this is going to be fine. And with Lloyd Pierce, it was like unproven. And okay, so yeah, you gotta, try something different and get this guy. Maybe this is the guy. And that was the thing, DeShaun, is when we saw those names that Shams and Woj came out with a couple weeks ago, it was like you had Quin Snyder, Kenny Atkinson, and then a list of guys who you would have been going, all right, I think and what we would have been doing is coming on here and convincing ourselves of maybe this will work. Maybe this will be the thing that can, but you don't have to do that for Quin. You don't. You've seen the results, and it feels like that, like we said earlier, that was number one top candidate was selected. What more can you ask for?
No, not a whole lot more. And I'll tell you what, I think I mentioned this on the last episode. If so, I guess you're just going to get ready to hear it again. Listen, get prepared for certain things. This is one that Hawks fans should feel good about. This is, people ask me all the time, what do you think about Nate? You like Nate? You don't like Nate? And you're hearing so many different mixed things, about him and his tenure as the head coach for the Atlanta Hawks. And mine has always been, I would have been okay if he remained the coach. I'm not the biggest Nate fan in the world, but I'm not anti-Nate either. I appreciate him for what he has done for this town, because at the end of the day, listen, he did something that had never been done in this town. He got them to the Eastern Conference Finals and actually won a game. So, you show your appreciation for that, because that's when things started to begin to, change and look a little bit different.
And that was actually something that Trae Young, of all, because people love to, and it was well documented that Trae and Nate didn't have the best relationship, and that specifically this season there had been some pretty rocky moments that had a lot of people concerned. However, when it came time that Trae did finally speak, it was he who was like, hey, this guy deserves his flowers for taking this franchise where it had never been before. And it was honestly like as Trey was saying that to us, it was like, yeah, like this is a great
Who
point.
are you and what have you done with the Trae Young that we all have come to know?
Oh no, see, that Trey was still there because he still told us that he likes to keep his private stuff private and he just lets us make up stuff. And then he also got frustrated with the narrative that Nate McMillan's voice was no longer reaching the team. And he said, he didn't know why we were trying to create this sort of thing, even though that was what his general manager, Landry Fields, literally said in the press conference on Wednesday.
Yeah, and some of his own teammates too, by the way.
Yes. Also, that he should have been speaking next to. I don't know what circumstances led to that. I know Thursday there was a legitimate family emergency that did occur. But we did get to talk to him, and that's honestly water under the bridge. It's all in the past at this point. You're not going to change things. And I don't know, him speaking or not speaking was not going to make a massive difference in the future of this franchise because now those decisions have been made.
Well, I feel like doing that was just going to ultimately end up bringing a little bit more criticism some way, somehow. But when I told the people and that's what I'm saying. Whether he spoke or not, it was just going to be there. I'll tell you this much, when I tell the people to start getting ready for certain things, get ready to start hearing, where did this Hawks team come from? This is the Atlanta Hawks that we've been waiting to see since coming into the beginning of the year and expected to have a top 4 spot in the East with the addition of DeJounte Murray. Be prepared for us to get ready to start hearing who in the hell's idiotic idea was it to leave Trae Young off of the All-Star roster? Like all of these things are because I think he's about to get ready to be that good or at least have that kind of an impact. And it's not going to be from him. It's going to be a team effort, and that's just the reality. But with success or lack thereof will always stay in your quarterback, and in this case, it's Trae Young. But I do want the people to, remember those things. Remember that. I've been a little bit discouraged, or just unhappy a little bit with some of the things that I've been hearing about Trae from people that, when he's taking that deep jump shot from the logo and is going in and you're taking them to somewhere they've never been, people love you. And that's just part of life. But when you're losing in the first round, coming off the year Eastern Conference Finals, turning around, another coach, you're getting him fired too, and all these other things, and they're not playing nearly as well. And you're not shooting the ball very well, and that's what we brought you here to do because that's what you do best in terms of your attributes, what you can bring to the team. That's what you drafted. You drafted this guy to do those sorts of things. I want people to keep the same energy though, Caleb. And in fact, I did this one just for you, if you don't mind. Now, I don't close your eyes, Caleb. I don't want you to get too excited, but I will tell you that I put a little something together, Caleb. Okay. I decided, I said, man, my boy Caleb always finds a way to come through and make sure that he's wearing his red and he's getting excited. Now, if you remember, Caleb, I told the people, and I don't want to get too, over my skis because I did say, wait until after this All-Star break. Okay, you're going to start getting ready to see a totally different looking team. So I just wanted to reflect.
Hoodie's coming off.
Got to get it over the big bald head there. I just wanted to reflect, Caleb.
Okay.
That, now is the time for people to start doing their believing again. This is all the same stuff that people say about. I try and tell people, I don't know if these Hawks fans. I don't know if I want to call them fair weather and all the things that they say about the fan base here. Now's the time to get excited. I've been saying it. They're dropping games to Charlotte. They're dropping games to this one, dropping games to that one, dropping games to the YMCA. Might as well have been.
Yeah.
But I said, give it until after this break, and they're going to start getting it together. Now, they're only 2-0. I get it. Very small sample size and whatever else, what have you. But good things are still to come. And one thing that people cannot deny nor ignore is that vibe, that energy, and that feel is exactly that feeling that you get about this turnaround is exactly what I saw in advance, because that is exactly what it's coming to. Does that mean that they're about to win the remainder of the games and run the table? Absolutely not. But the upward trajectory that this team is on, I think a lot of people are starting to begin to see that. But I just wasn't very happy about some of the slander in which, in some ways, Trey brought on himself. But it's not just about Trey and that player. It's also about the team. When they're not performing well and it feels like guys are talking behind each other's backs and there's just a lot going on, people don't want to dedicate time out of their lives to those things. And I overstand those things. But in that same token, keep that same energy, because, this is a time to get ready to stand behind this team again. And I think that they could really, do some damage for the remainder of the regular season. And then right now, what are they? They're in 8th spot. They're a game and a half behind Miami. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're 500 in the conference. They're 500 in the division. They got speaking of Miami, they got a couple back-to-backs with them coming up real soon. I think road games, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. It was that same team that, just was a little bit too physical for Trey, and just some things were not all the way seemingly right. Other teams are going to move down. You got to imagine Brooklyn, who's in front of them because of all the players that they have. They don't have those guys anymore. They're going to fall. Some of these teams are just going to fall as the Hawks get better. How far up they move, we don't know until later on, obviously, but I get I told you, Caleb. Good feeling.
I mean, first off, I didn't know you were a fortune teller, because what you saw coming for this team, I didn't think possible under Nate McMillan. And that's not because I don't think Nate McMillan is a competent coach. I believed exactly what was happening that led to his firing was he was preaching a message that the players just weren't taking in. It was I used the reference of Charlie Brown on the telephone last week, and I mean that, of the wah 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 wah. It just wasn't going through, and so I was like, this team is not headed towards anywhere successful with this happening. And at that point, it had seemed pretty clear that the Atlanta Hawks were sticking with Nate McMillan because they didn't give him the opportunity to leave when he reportedly wanted to leave. I didn't know that this was going on behind the scenes, that they were reaching a really close partnership with Quin Snyder, that they were going to take this seriously, not only in the level of power that they were going to give Quin, but also the financial part of all of this, which then leads me to something that you love throwing the digs at Atlanta and their fans just in general as a city. And I've had this happen. Yeah, and I've had this happen a couple of times.
I don't throw digs at the city.
No, for fans of leaving games or not showing up when the team's not good.
Yeah, I'm all about that.
So but because we talked about money, and this is something that Andy Bunker preaches all the time on Andy and Randy, is the two most important things, or the two most finite things you have is time and money in your life. Those are the most valuable things that you've got. And so how people decide to spend their time and money, they got to make decisions. And now I know Knicks fans, they got something wrong with them, and so they're going to be there no matter what. And I think of Cleveland Browns fans. They're going to be there no matter what, no matter how bad ownership takes advantage of them. And certainly in those two situations, the Haslams and the Dolans have surely taken advantage of some fan bases. And I don't think that Tony Ressler has necessarily taken advantage of a fan base. He put out a really impressive product and then got a little caught up with things, and people make mistakes. I won't blame him necessarily for it as long as he's willing to make the changes that are necessary, and it seems like that's what this team is doing, this front office, this organization is doing. So the fans will come with that, and the fact that they wouldn't be interested in a product that when the players don't look like they want to be there, which that's what we saw against Charlotte and against New York before the All-Star break. That was 2 games witnessing a team was not interested in being there and was like just looking towards, we want to get some time off and get away. Now that they're rejuvenated, now that they had a different voice and Joe Prunty, who helped them pull off a 49-point quarter against the Cleveland Cavaliers as they routed the Cavs in their first game back. What was it, 136-119? And then you follow that up with an impressive performance against, honestly, DeShaun, you're counting out the Brooklyn Nets. I'm telling you, just because they lost Kyrie and KD does not mean, like, yes, are they worse technically? Absolutely. But getting Mikal Bridges, getting Dorian Finney-Smith, they still got some pieces over there. So they're not going to completely fall. Hey, that's fine. We're talking about Cam Thomas, the guy who's got he had 3 40-point games.
Love Cam Thomas.
Yeah, you got Mikal Bridges, who had honestly been tearing things up over in Phoenix, doing really impressive stuff, while Chris Paul and Devin Booker, I was blanking on his name for a second, while those 2 guys have spent a bunch of time out with injury, Mikal was kind of holding that team together, and he's doing impressive things with Brooklyn. And honestly, like he was a block shot away from taking them to overtime. Just so happens that Atlanta has just an absolute ice cold killer, and Trae Young, who has and I asked Trae about the mental clock in his head of, all right, you got 7 seconds. You know, how did you go from taking the inbound? Interestingly enough, under Joe Prunty, it was Trae receiving the inbound, not Trae doing the inbounding, something that I'm sure a lot of fans are pretty excited about, different from Nate McMillan. Trae gets the inbound and then goes up the floor, has enough of an internal clock in his head to pump fake Mikal Bridges, so he goes across his face and then gets the shot up, even though Spencer Dinwiddie had his hand wrapped around. So fitting that in that minuscule time frame enough to knock down the shot, beat the Brooklyn Nets. What we had not seen that, DeShaun, from Trae Young all season. And the funny thing was, the Hawks social media, they go essentially they threw a dig about Trae Young wasn't selected to the All-Star game, but he did that. And I was thinking, well, is AJ Griffin an All-Star? Because AJ Griffin's got more game winners this season than Trae Young did. But if Trae just needed this, hey, I feel the organization is behind me and I feel like we're headed in a positive direction, if that's what he needed, I can tell you that I don't think that I want a star who is not the most mature person and who doesn't feel like a leader. But if the franchise can put the right pieces around him to make it all work, who cares how the sausage is made?
You get it.
Yeah, as long as I'm eating an incredible hot dog, I don't care how it gets put together. And that's honestly how I'm starting to feel about this Hawks team moving forward. Is it's like, okay, if you're gonna do all of this feels like it's going to work, and I won't have to go on air as a radio host, as a podcast host, and talk about leadership not being there and guys being too immature and this and that, because you're gonna put the right pieces in place to make it all work.
Not really sure why you use sausage as an analogy, Caleb, but it's not my business, man. Listen,
what you got against?
I probably just wouldn't have said sausage. I guess maybe that's all I was really going at.
That's fine. Hey, just there's a couple of words not to say after that, because you don't want to get a $40,000 fine from the NBA.
And you don't have to worry about me getting any sort of a fine from the Odyssey group either. But let me tell you, Caleb, the crazy part is that, for all we know, Quin can come in here and say the exact same things that Nate has said, and or that Lloyd has said. But it can just, let me see if I can think of a good Caleb generation where it hit different.
It does.
It can
does.
hit different.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just what happens. I give these different examples and analogies. Sometimes you can hear when you're growing up, your parents are trying to
That's
tell you
exactly
something.
what I was thinking.
And then all of a sudden you someone else a little bit more relatable. So which is one of the words besides accountability that we've been hearing for quite some time, but somebody a little bit more relatable might come and give you verbatim, word by word, the exact same thing that your parents have been telling you, but because it's coming from a different voice, a new voice. And that's what Landry Fields has been talking about. Part of the reason why he wanted to, make the decision that he made. And he wanted to be clear about the fact that he made it.
Yeah.
But even more so, when I'm looking at all of these different things, and I feel like this isn't about, I don't have any tarot cards or, I'm no Miss Cleo or any of that type of stuff, fortune teller and everything else. There's no need for this crystal ball thing. We've got it all up here, Caleb. This is all the crystal ball that they need, man.
Just
you
lean
just
into the camera.
Yeah. Go ahead and do that whole thing. Look, we've seen it so many times. This team looked totally different when Lloyd was gone. And then they brought in Nate McMillan. And they typically play better. You look over the course of the history of this franchise, they just play different for some reason, whether there's been a coaching change or not in this time of the year. And ironically, around March. I don't know if
they're all just a bunch of college basketball fans. That's what it is.
No,
That's
we're on course. I don't know if we're on course with the same thing here, Caleb, but listen, I know what was happening when I'm saying this, people aren't believing. You ever heard of the analogy where, I'm sure you've heard of it, go in one ear, and then what happens?
Oh, I do it a lot, out the other. Yeah, it happens to me quite frequently.
And I've been trying to tell some people, what was happening when I'm trying to explain this is that it wasn't even going in the first ear to give it a chance to come out the other. Now, I know much of this is going to sound like, wait a minute, it's starting to sound like you said Hawks going to the championship. By far, I'm not saying that. But you have to love where it's going. There's been way too many times that this franchise, trust me, there's so much lack of success, respectfully, but just keeping it honest, so much lack of success that there's a red banner hanging up in the ceiling, okay? And it doesn't say finals appearance, runner-up, none of that on it, okay? The time is now. Remember, you're not the young Hawks. You're not the young pups anymore. Those are the Houston Rockets and the, Detroit Pistons and the, getting ready to be San Antonio Spurs and some of these other guys. But you got to make sure you're coming ready to play because you're considered veteran now by this or to a degree in comparison to those teams now.
Sure.
So there's expectations that come with this because guess what? For how long were we talking about you don't got a star player? Nobody wants to come here. We don't get anybody in free agency, but everybody lives here, which probably makes things feel a little bit worse than it actually is. And all of these different things. You get your star player. Then what came after that? Well. You need your Robin to your Batman to a degree, right? You got your Robin to your Batman in Debo Murray. Coach. Okay, now it's about the coach. Not about the coach anymore. I feel really good about the coach that they have in place. Definitely got to beef up the depth and the talent on the roster in terms of on the bench. But they're in a pretty good spot. I mean, as bad as they have been, they haven't stunk it up so much to the point where you cannot see them making a run and still getting a very respectable seed considering everything that has transpired. I think the gray clouds has found themselves to head east into a different direction and it's starting for the sun to shine again. Thank God.
Yeah, and it'll start on Tuesday once again after the Hawks have started off after All-Star break period 2-0. They'll host the Washington Wizards, who they lead by 2.5 games, I believe, that Washington is behind the Hawks right now. So you can increase the gap there a little bit more. Also important to note that the Wizards have lost both of their games since they've come back from the All-Star break. They lost to the Knicks and to the Bulls. So, they're not going to lay down or anything like that, but you feel like you see the trajectory of two different teams heading in opposite directions. So now's the time to take advantage of that momentum. You'll have to host the Portland Trail Blazers on Friday, who obviously we just saw Damian Lillard have an incredible, insane performance, dropping 71 points the other night. And then, he'll be at State Farm Arena trying to keep Portland afloat and keep them still a competitive team in the Western Conference. And then, like you spoke on, DeShaun, 2 games in Miami, not back-to-back. They will have a day in between, but they'll be staying in the same city. And that's a team who's above you, who you're looking to dig into where they're at in the Eastern Conference and build yourself up as either the top play-in team, or maybe you can squeak in and become that 6th seed and avoid the play-in altogether, which would be the biggest win of the season, quite honestly. And so it's just like we've said so many times throughout this, and I'll kind of finish it on this point of optimism is incredibly high. The number of excuses that this team has gets shorter. The list gets shorter and shorter every single day, because the next thing that was on that list that you just talked about, the head coach being one of those things that fans within the that love this team and then just fans outside of and media, we're really looking at this head coaching thing as being an issue. All right, they addressed that now. Now it's time for the players to step up, even though we've talked about the fact that their bench is not as strong as they need it to be. It's stepped up in some good moments so far, especially as of late. So all we can do is expect more of the same, and hopefully we get to have a lot more of these fun conversations as not only the regular season goes along, but hopefully a deep run through the postseason. But that's about all the time that we've got. I know we ran over probably a little bit. There's a ton of stuff that we had to get into. So with that, for my co-host DeShaun Tate, I'm Caleb Johnson. Thanks to you fans for watching and to listening to Nothing But Nest.